America, the end of the 20s. The world is changing fast. The Wall Street crash, the Great Depression, which would last for 12 years, begins. The movie world upended at the end of the 20s too. Sound cinema was taking off. Talking pictures sold 10 million more tickets a year than silent cinema. There was money in sound. So movie theatres like this one, the Palace Theatre in Times Square, New York, wired for sound. Filmmaking with sound was a whole new way of making movies. Real locations were hard to use now because someone was bound to start hammering metal or digging a road. So filmmakers were forced back into studios like this that were renamed sound stages. What happened in such stages? This scene from the 1931 film Her Dilemma shows what happened. Because recording sound was suddenly the main thing, picture became secondary. When we cut to the close-up of singer Bing Crosby, the violinist is still playing in the exact same position, slightly awkwardly framed beside Crosby's face. This is because it's shot with two cameras filming at the same time for sound reasons, like TV. If the close-up had been shot single camera, the violinist could have been moved and the close-up would have looked less cluttered. And notice the lighting, it's flatter and more overhead than we've seen in Hollywood movies so far, like lighting in a TV soap opera. This is because if you shoot a close-up and a wide shot at the same time, you can't light them differently. So, at the start of the sound era, cinema became far less cinematic. Unlike horror films, these had no European roots. Alcohol was illegal in America between 1920 and 1933, so gangs of entrepreneurial lawbreakers, gangsters, ran it between country and city. Often of Italian or Irish descent, they structured their empires like families. One of the first great gangster pictures was this one, Public Enemy, made just 2 years after sound came in. James Cagney is a sparky, rat-tat-tat opportunist who's made money running liquor. This is him and his childhood buddy. They're always on the alert. But then the buddy's gunned down from an opposite building, beautifully staged in deep focus. Cagney runs for cover. But then emerges, almost smirking. No grief here. Cagney, a former dancer, had charm. Many organisations in America denounced the film for indulging this charm. This was the start of a moral debate about gangster films that continues to this day. Also in the 1930s, journalist Ben Hecht wrote and Howard Hawks directed Scarface, Shame of a Nation, turning the gangster genre into Greek tragedy. This is the end of the film. A lover's clinch, and yet they're not lovers. They're brother and sister.
Why didn't you shoot?
It's because you're me, and I'm you. No, it's been that way.
Paul Mooney is the ultra-violent, not very bright gangster with the thick Italian accent, as if he's just arrived in America. His eyebrows were thickened to make him look almost ape-like. She's shot. He says he's nothing without her.
You're all I got left. Little boy, he's gone. I know he's gone. I'm no good without you, Jessica. I'm no good with myself. Jessica! Jessica! They're out there. They want to get me. They're all there. Jessica, they won't give me a chance, please.
The tragic neediness beneath the macho surface. The smallness of the big man.
Jessica, don't go. Please, Jessica.
Scarface was remade with cold brilliance in 1983. This time, Oliver Stone wrote and Brian De Palma directed. He used his trademark crane shots. Camonte is now called Montana. He's again a recent immigrant, now a Cuban thug dealing in cocaine. The film chimed well with the consumerist 1980s, shiny buildings and flashy pop music. In the original film, Camonte dies under a sign that says the world is yours. De Palma takes this moment and turns it into a Baroque scene in the middle of his film. His craning camera points to the irony. The world is not Montana's. The world is over for Montana. Hollywood made 70 gangster films in the 3 years after 1930 alone. They influenced cinema on every continent for decades. In Japan in 1954, the Seven Samurai mixed gangster themes with a traditional Japanese story of swordsmen and villagers. Scenes like this, that were lashed with rain, looked like they were drawn in charcoal, and the Seven Samurai became one of the most influential films of all time. Once Upon a Time in America was perhaps the best gangster film of the lot. This character, Noodles, played by Robert De Niro, had, in his downward look, the dismay of the movie gangster, his fascism, victimhood, hubris, style, and enigma. A complex set of ideas, all deriving from American cinema of the 1930s. Musicals, horror films, and gangster pictures all exploded in the 30s. But it was the Western that had been going from the first decade of cinema. Most are set between 1860 and 1900. This scene from John Ford's The Iron Horse shows so much about the Western genre. It's a landscape film, of course, not a cityscape. The camera is moving fast in a chase scene, a staple of Westerns, whereas in gangster pictures, the camera was often static. The Iron Horse of the title is, of course, the railway, the coming of modernity, a big theme in Westerns. Ford actually films from the train, using it as a camera dolly. And, of course, the drama is a shootout between white settlers and indigenous Indians. Nearly all the mob films are about lawbreakers in a cynical age. Many of the best Westerns are about lawmakers in an idealistic age. In this much later Western by John Ford, Henry Fonda plays Wyatt Earp, here sitting on the right, who's become marshal in Tombstone to create the law.
Leaving in 30 minutes. See, you're on it.
The town, society is just being born, for white people at least. Fonda surveys the town as if it's virgin territory. The lights clean and white. In gangster movies, of course, the town, the city is dying, the world is dark. No one remembers the law being made. Ninochka is a joyless communist who finds love in Paris and starts dressing like a princess.
Comrades, people of the world, the revolution is on the march. I know bombs will fall, civilization will crumble, but not yet, please. Wait, what's the hurry? Give us our moment.
She's intoxicated with love, diamonds, the glittering city, and lit like romantic cinema in the 1920s.
So happy and so tired.
Like Ninotchka, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz lives in a grey reality too. In this famous moment, we see the back of an actress wearing sepia clothes in a sepia set. The door opens from her world onto a fantastic colour set, and a second actress, Judy Garland in blue gingham check, walks into a land of apparent pleasure, Oz. A fantasy world like Ninotchka's Paris. Yet Oz is a false dream for Dorothy. She comes to understand that there's no place like home. As the camera cranes, the film gently questions the very 30s idea of escapism. And here's the third woman dealing with escapism. Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind is rich and spoilt. She starts life in a fantasy world, but steps into reality and war. The rising camera in this brilliant single shot shows the scale of the trauma. The previous two films didn't blame Ninotchka or Dorothy for making mistakes about escapism, but Gone with the Wind's God's eye view punishes Scarlett for her denial. She loses everything. Gone with the Wind's thought of as one of the most escapist films ever made, yet its content explicitly attacks escapism. Its form is another matter. It created so vivid an emotional universe, its craning camera so grand, its music was so lush that the film's bitter pill was sugared. Ninotchka, Dorothy and Scarlett show that escapism was the main melody in 1939. But listen carefully, and you can hear the distant drums of war, realism and Orson Welles.